50% of the number of departures of SpiceJet have been restricted. Now, I'm just going to go through this key points which have actually been raised in this letter of the Director General of Civil Aviation. This is the letter, which is an interim order, but it's been forwarded by the DGCA. This order has actually been sent across to SpiceJet. What exactly does it say? It says, on a number of occasions, the aircraft either turned back to its originating station or continued landing to the destination with degraded safety margins. There is poor internal safety oversight and inadequate maintenance actions which have resulted in degradation of the safety margins. Can you just switch off the talkback for a second? Thirdly, financial assessment carried out by the Director General of Civil Aviation in September last year has revealed that SpiceJet is operating on a cash and carry basis and that suppliers and approved vendors are not being paid on a regular basis, leading to the shortage of spares and frequent invoking of minimum equipment lists. Firstly, what does cash and carry means? It essentially means that the airline pays for the fuel that they're going to use on an individual flight. It's only then that the aircraft are refueled and a flight can take place. Very significantly, and this was what the show cause notice to SpiceJet had actually said earlier on, suppliers and approved vendors are not being paid on a regular basis, leading to a shortage of spares and a frequent invoking of minimum equipment lists. MELs, or minimum equipment list, basically means that it's legally permissible to fly the aircraft, but not all the available systems are in operations. Now, this can happen because aircraft have redundancies. So there are multiple systems which actually are there to ensure that a flight is safely operated. But ideally, all your systems should be worked and you should not be invoking an MEL or minimum equipment list. Now, as a result of this show cause to the airline, SpiceJet was asked to actually give its reply. Now, SpiceJet gave its reply, and after giving its reply, this action against the airline has actually been taken. Let's have the next page, if we can. And this is the operative part of what the interim order is about. Let's have the next graphic. The next graphic actually says, in view of various, change this page please to the other point. Yeah, so in view of findings of various spot checks, inspections, and the reply to the show cause notice submitted by SpiceJet for continued sustenance of safe and reliable air transport, the number of departures of SpiceJet are hereby restricted to 50% of the number of departures which have been approved under the summer schedule for a period of 8 weeks. Right, so that's the bottom line. The number of departures of SpiceJet restricted to 50% of the number of departures which were initially approved for the summer schedule of the airline. And very, very significantly, another point, and I'm just going through this notice as we speak right now, is that the airline has actually been told that it's only after they prove within a stipulated period of 8 weeks that they are safe to operate will the regulator actually allow them to operate more flights. So during this 8-week period, the airline shall be subjected to enhanced surveillance by the Director General of Civil Aviation, and a further decision in the matter shall be taken thereafter. Well, joining us now, Vinamra Loghani, who tracks these developments as well. How big a setback is this, Vinamra, to SpiceJet?
Thank you for having me on the show again, Vishnu. So you see, we're in what is one of the 2 weak quarters for our airlines in India. So this is a quarter where not very many people travel historically and demand is subdued anyway. So as it stands, the order, this interim order, which, as you rightly pointed out, is an interim one, it limits the number of departures for the airline in question to 50% of those approved under the summer schedule. Now, as it stands, the airline concerned is only operating as many departures because of subdued demand. So, in all honesty, this should not make a lot of difference to the day-to-day running of the airline because the number of departures are curtailed anyway. But, I mean, in the grand scheme of things, yes, of course, the Director General of Civil Aviation has taken cognizance of the various incidents which were reported, and as any regulator globally would do, they've taken action.
Vinamra, to the best of your knowledge, what percentage of approved flights is SpiceJet operating right now?
Well, I don't really have the numbers in front of me, Vishnu, but it is between 50 and 60%. It usually depends because given that demand for travel is a lot more on the weekends, so more flights are operated largely by all airlines over the weekend, and the number drops considerably during the weekdays. So yes.
So if the airline is operating 50 to 60% of what it's allowed, what you're basically saying is that the overall number of flights which would be impacted would be less than, say, had they been operating 100% of their flights, in which case 50% would completely go. What you're saying is that only they are not operating the 100% of their flights, and therefore the total number of flights which will be operated, which will be affected, will be lower. But I would suggest, Vinamra, that number would still be fairly significant.
Well, yes. I mean, you see, it completely depends on how they sort of like allocate or like make cutbacks to the schedule to comply with this. You see, unless a detailed sort of like, interaction has happened between the regulator and the airline to say you've got to cancel X number of flights on a certain date. If that is not the case, then they can usually use the quieter days of the week when there's subdued demand and sort of like, operate fewer flights then to comply with the order, and then operate a significantly more number of flights over the weekend when there is more demand. So, I mean, overall, like I said, yes, for me personally, what this means is, you see, the regulator has done what they were supposed to do, taken cognizance of the matter, and now it's for SpiceJet to comply with this. And hopefully, another review would be done at the end of the 8-week periods, and we'll sort of see what happens then.
Vinamra, what impact would this have on passengers who've already made bookings?
Well, I mean, there are rules in place. There is a charter that has been placed by the Ministry of Civil Aviation. So the responsibility now falls on SpiceJet to reach out to passengers and inform them in advance if they've been impacted, if their flight's been impacted, and if it's done, like if it's a flight that's to be operated in the near term, then there are certain rules and procedures that have been in place, and I'm sure the airline would comply with those as they are expected to.
All right. So that's an important point. We're just trying to just go through a couple of points. Just in a tweet yesterday, SpiceJet has said that India's most preferred airline is as safe and reliable as it has been for the last 17 years. Aviation regulator, the DGCA, audited our entire operational fleet, and every plane has been given the green signal to fly, and there has been no safety violation. This was, Vinamra, on the 26th of July, in other words, yesterday, that they went and tweeted this, and today the DGCA comes out with this. So there's obviously a mismatch between what the airline believes its safety standards are and what the regulator does.
You see, I'll be honest with you, Vishnu, if the airline was unsafe, the whole operation would have been grounded immediately. I would like to think that, in aviation, as you would rightly know, and I mean, safety is priority. So if there was even an iota of doubt in our regulator's mind that a particular airline is not safe, they would have honestly grounded the airline completely. This has happened in the past in India. So the fact that all operations have not been grounded goes to show that, that they believe that it's safe for the airline to fly. However, given the number of incidents that's happened in the past, they would like to make sure this is you can call it, a punishment of sorts for having whatever incidents they've had in the past. And I must draw your attention to point number 3 on the order. I mean, it does say that, the DGCA has observed, and I quote, that SpiceJet is taking measures for arresting the trends of incidents. So you see, if they were not safe to fly, they would be grounded. At least that is what my understanding is.
That's interesting. They operate primarily operate two types of aircraft. The regulator doesn't specify whether it's the Boeing 737 fleet or the Boeing 737 MAX fleet or their Q400 fleet. has been impacted. It just says restricting 50% of the number of departures approved. So that would indicate perhaps that they have concerns on the airline safety record per se. That's just a point that strikes me. Vinamra?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, like you rightly said, they have well, 3 fleets. I mean, if you were to consider the 737 and the MAX as separate fleets. So I'm sure the airline at this point in time is trying to get more clarity from the regulator and more than anything else, manage the impact on customers. So, and let's be honest, I think apart from safety, you see the fact that passengers should not be inconvenienced is also a regulator's priority. And it has always been. So the Ministry of Civil Aviation and the regulator have ensured that, you see, people don't get inconvenienced. So now that the order is out, the airline, the regulator would be working together to see how this can be sort of carried out with the least amount of impact to customers, which is really what matters, apart from safety, of course. And like I said, it's come at a time where, demand for travel is vastly reduced because of high fares, among other things. So had this been Christmas or Diwali or bang in the middle of summer holidays, we would have had a situation at hand where lakhs of people would not have been able to travel. But thankfully, that's not the case. I mean, I guess it's never well timed for an airline to have their operations curtailed. But if I was to look at it from an analytical sort of standpoint, I think I'm glad it's happening now and not bang in the middle of summer holidays a couple of weeks ago.
I think it's also laudable that the regulator has placed security and safety first, as they should be doing, and they carry to press on with this. I think that's important.
Exactly.
Vinamra, thanks very much for joining us.